When time folded once more, my paws touched cold stone surrounded by water. Before me, Tenochtitlan rose like something impossible. Built upon Lake Texcoco, it seemed to float, sustained by canals and platforms with almost impossible precision. The air was humid, thick with the scents of flowers, corn, and ritual smoke. Canoes glided silently through the channels. The sound was organized, rhythmic, a living city, but disciplined. I stood before something designed, sustained by generations. Temples rose in the distance like symbolic axes. Golden light wove between structures. I saw priests, warriors, merchants. Each had their place. There was no improvisation. There was order. And in that order, there was real power, established, unquestionable. My eyes swept the city from a nearby platform. I felt the harmony, like someone who knows music about to go out of tune. The breeze carried scents, spices, copal, organized labor. Nothing was fragile. It was stable, strong. Tenochtitlan did not conceive of its own vulnerability. No civilization that knows its power can imagine what it cannot understand. That would be the first failure I observed that day. The known world was the only possible world. That illusion would be fatal. But that day, it was still only the breath of a civilization that did not know it was breathing its last days. I watched. I knew what was coming. Tenochtitlan was complete, and it was close to the end. I walked among endless markets. Tlatelolco churned with life. Thousands trading food, cloth, tools, pottery, stones. Every transaction followed rules. There were judges, scribes, orders. Nothing was chaotic. Order was the very structure of prosperity. The Chinampas, artificial farming islands, stretched across the lake like a living chessboard. Corn, beans, squashes, flowers grew in abundance. It was technique refined through generations. It was civilization functioning with precision. I watched families, artisans, priests. Children learned by observation. Religion permeated everything, but not as blind superstition. It was a symbolic system that explained the world, organized time, maintained order. Every gesture held meaning. The lake reflected everything: organization, strength, confidence. But it also reflected an illusion that this was the only possible world. It was vulnerable to what it could not imagine. That was the flaw, not weakness, but limitation of understanding. Tenochtitlan was complete, self-sufficient. It functioned by its own rules. Nothing was lacking. No need drove it beyond itself. So when the unknown arrived, the city had no tools to comprehend it. I walked invisible among the people. I knew what was coming. Collision between two worlds that could not speak the same language. Tenochtitlan still breathed in its ancient rhythm, unaware that rhythm was about to break. Fear finds space, even in the most organized worlds. I heard murmurs in the markets, stories of strange signs, flames in the sky, voices at night, tales of monsters. Floating houses, as they called them, ancient omens resurfacing. Moctezuma carried the weight of these stories. Absolute ruler, but prisoner of his own beliefs. He knew the prophecies. Quetzalcoatl would return that year. Cycles that end in violence. The world conspired to confirm these fears. I watched him in silence. A man surrounded by power, isolated by doubt. Ruling requires decision. Prophecies require interpretation. Between the two, paralysis is born. Moctezuma was not imprisoned by chains, but by uncertainty. The fear came from the possibility that the unknown was right, that the prophecies were true, that everything was temporary, a breath before silence. The priests burned copal, observed signs. Nothing was comforting. Each interpretation grew darker. And Moctezuma felt that decision and inaction led to the same result, waiting for fear to be confirmed. Paralysis consumed him. Meanwhile, reports grew. Floating houses, men of metal, animals never before seen. I understood that kind of paralysis. When structures of certainty, religion, politics, power, collide with the unknown, the result is always immobility. And immobility in moments of change is surrender before the first battle. They arrived by lake like something that did not belong. Hernán Cortés and his men in strange vessels. Animals never seen, horses, war dogs, weapons that spat fire, a faith that accepted no dialogue. The encounter came in layers, silent at first. I watched the first meeting. The shock was semiotic, not violent. Glances without understanding. The Spanish saw wealth. The Aztecs saw divine signs. Neither saw the other as they truly were. Each observed through their own symbols. And those structures did not touch. Malintzin, called Malinche, became a bridge between worlds that did not wish to understand each other. Translator, yes. But translation is always interpretation. Impossible concepts passed through her words. One God, a distant emperor, private property. Nothing corresponded. A war did not begin. A misreading did. A catastrophe born not from malice, but from fundamental incomprehension. The Aztecs negotiated with divine beings. The Spanish conquered a primitive empire. Two systems of reality as distinct as water and fire. Cortés entered as a conqueror, fulfilling religious destiny. He had no doubt. He knew exactly what would happen. In that contrast between Moctezuma's paralysis and Cortés' unshakable certainty lay the difference. Uncertainty against certainty. Certainty always acts first. I watched from afar. That was the point of no return. Collision of incompatible visions. It was not brute force yet. It was semiotics. How each side interpreted the same events in absolutely divergent ways. The Spanish did not see Tenochtitlan. They saw gold. Ritual objects were reduced to metal. Sacred symbols became currency. Where Aztecs saw cosmic meaning, the newcomers saw quantifiable value. Gold spoke louder than any diplomacy. Each Aztec gift reinforced Spanish desire. Each display of wealth fed the certainty that this world existed to be taken, converted, possessed. There was no negotiation. The terms were not shared. Gold was sacred to one, merchandise to the other. I watched Cortés, not as cartoon villain, but as a man shaped by another system. For him, conquest was virtue. Possession was right. Conversion was duty. The city did not need to be understood. It needed to be dominated. The gold confirmed his mission. Greed found fertile soil in a world that believed it was negotiating with gods. Tenochtitlan offered gold as diplomatic gift. Cortés received it as tribute of conquest. Same action, irreconcilable interpretations. Each led to increasingly violent consequences. The palace housed men who saw only gold in the walls. They saw no art. They saw no organization. They saw property. Tenochtitlan was treasure to be extracted, not a system to be understood. Incomprehension is more destructive than malice. I watched. I understood that was the ultimate point of no return, not open violence yet. The reduction of a complex world to a single metric, economic value. When a world is reduced to a metric, its destruction is not cruelty. It is accounting. Moctezuma was made prisoner in his own city. A ruler surrounded by his subjects, but controlled by foreigners in his own palace. Symbolic power shattered. There was no need for visible chains. Magical authority simply vanished. The people watched their Tlatoani imprisoned. The structure crumbled. I watched the city change. Silence replaced confidence. Fear replaced order. The entire system collapsed. There was no violence yet, but there was death. The death of the structure that had held everything together for centuries. Moctezuma died on June 29th, during the events leading to the Noche Triste. Death surrounded by uncertainty. The symbol had fallen. An empire without a symbol is merely territory. The Spanish believed that they had won, but tension accumulated, invisible. Tenochtitlan seethed beneath forced obedience. Priests performed rituals in secret. Warriors prepared weapons. Rage distilled in every silent corner. The city had not surrendered. It had only paused. Like before a scream, months accumulated. Reinforcements arrived from Spain. Alliances were sealed with peoples resentful of Aztec rule. Cortés did not retreat. He withdrew only to return stronger. The city believed it was in truce. It did not know it was being encircled. Not by weapons, but by politics. I felt the weight of those months. I knew what was coming. Violent rupture that would transform invisible control into open war. Moctezuma's paralysis had created a void. Cortez's certainty would fill it. Tenochtitlan would become a battlefield of its own inability to understand. Violence exploded when Aztec patience ended. Sacrifices interrupted. Massacres during ceremonies. The city reacted. In the Noche Triste, June 30th to July 1st, 1520, the Spanish fled under fierce attack. Many drowned, dragged down by the weight of gold. I watched bodies in the canals, blood mixed with water. The city believed it had won. Cortés had retreated. The Noche Triste was victory. Tenochtitlan did not know it had only begun to lose. But between that moment and August 1521, 11 months passed. 11 months of reorganization. Cortés gathered massive reinforcements. He built brigantines to control the lake. He negotiated alliances with peoples who resented Aztec rule. The city believed it was recovering. In reality, it was being encircled, not by weapons, but by strategy. When I returned, in August 1521, I found a siege methodical, relentless, absolute. Tenochtitlan was completely isolated. Canals were blocked. Food did not arrive. Military alliances had evaporated. The empire was imprisoned in its own crown of water. The siege was slow, cruel. Street after street taken. Temple after temple destroyed. Smallpox, invisible, silent, did what weapons could not. Hunger and disease became the real enemy. I watched days transform into weeks, into months. The silence that had meant order had become the silence of collapse. The organization that had defined Tenochtitlan became disorganization. The city did not fall at once. It sank. Canal by canal, street by street, heart by heart. Cuauhtémoc, the last Tlatoani, resisted to the end. Until August 13th, 1521. On that date, Tenochtitlan ceased to exist politically. The empire that had defied the lake was reduced to ruins. Canals that carried life now carried debris. Temples were demolished. The gold was removed, melted down, converted to abstraction. It ceased to be sacred, became mere metal. Gods were buried. Sacrifices ceased. Over the ruins rose Mexico City, stones reused. Gods buried, stories silenced. I walked through that empty space and understood something recurrent in history. Civilizations fall not only by external force, they fall by inability to imagine what they cannot understand. Tenochtitlan failed to conceive that another world existed. The Spanish triumphed because they could act. While Aztecs consulted oracles, Spanish advanced. While Moctezuma froze with doubt, Cortés decided with certainty. Certainty acts. Uncertainty paralyzes. When one side can act and the other freezes, the result is inevitable. Not by merit, but by failure. The paradox was bitter. The strength that had made Tenochtitlan invulnerable, its ability to interpret the world through sacred symbols, had become its weakness. When the world changes in ways symbols cannot explain, the entire system collapses spiritually before it collapses physically. I remained there among the stones of a civilization. I had seen many falls, but victors rarely understand what they destroyed. They only know they destroyed. And the vanquished rarely explain why they were destroyed. They only know they were. If you want to continue traveling with me through moments that shaped humanity, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Time holds many stories. Some shine like gold. Others remain buried. I will be there to observe them with you. Until the next episode,